welcome. This is episode 2 of our Talking Hobies webinar series. My name is Rich McVeigh. I'm the president of the International Hobie Class Association and your host for this series. This event and the others like it are sponsored by the International Hobie Class Association. And just a couple quick public service announcement. I mean, who are we? We're a group of sailors and volunteers, and we organize Hobie sailing events worldwide. We have recognized an opportunity to share some of our knowledge with others and have decided to bring this sort of series to you as to encourage and foster your participation in Hobie sailing. So for those of you that are members of the Hobie Class Association, we sincerely thank you for your support. If you're not a member, we encourage you to join. We absolutely cannot do these things without your support. And you can find more information about the Hobie Class Association at hobieclass.com. So this is what's called a Zoom webinar. It's a little bit different than a Zoom meeting that many of you are familiar with. The only people you'll see talking tonight are the panelists. Somewhere on your screen, you'll see a button called Q&A and a button called Chat, and we would encourage you to launch those now. You use the Q&A button to ask questions. We can respond to those questions either live in the webinar or through the Q&A chat. And we will be recording tonight's session and we'll make it available afterwards. What we did last week, we'll do the same as we published on YouTube. It takes about a day or so for us to get that lined up, but you'll see it on the Hobie Class Association YouTube channel. So again, joining me tonight is Mark Modderman. So we're continuing our theme from last week. We were focused on fiberglass repairs, and we covered a lot of ground on that, and we decided to continue that same theme tonight and sort of finish the job that we started with the Hobie 16 bow repair. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, no, we had started off last week with our grind out and assessing our damage and repair. We thought we'd jump right into it and kind of try and complete this. So hopefully this is a good thing for everybody.
All right, excellent. So why don't we jump right in? So we've shot some additional video, so I'm going to share that, and we'll do it in some segments. It's a little bit of a longer video. We'll share that in a few segments, and we'll stop it along the way and let Mark talk about the different things he's been doing throughout the repair. So let me start that here momentarily.
I'm Mark Modderman. We're back with our second part of our gel coats and chip repair. I'd like to thank Grace, my daughter, and Christy, my girlfriend, for helping me out with the filming. And it was suggested that I not ramble as much by my daughter, so we'll try to get to it.
A lot of grinding going on there.
We fill this with the vinyl ester reinforced putty, and I'm busy grinding it out. And like before, I'd said that we use the tape as a guide, and you can see I've ground on the edge here and started hitting the tape. And as soon as I hit the tape, I slow down. And just to get the bulk of it, I'll show you what I mean as I grind a little bit further. Ground it out now with my little roll-up disc on my right angle drill. And you can use any sander really to grind it out, was one of the questions. But I'm going straight from my little grinding disc. I've used the tape as a guide. I've got the bulk of it down. I'm going straight to a block with 80 grit on it. And I'm going to sand that out to get the shape pretty much where I want it. Okay. Get it out with 80 grit. I've got some Formula 27 Evercoat putty. It's waterproof. And I'm going to give this a tight screed on the repair. Okay, that's it. Okay, we've filled it with the Formula 27 and sanded it out with an 80 grit. You can step down to a 120. Okay, using the point I wanted to make here was that you use the tape the whole time as a guide so that you're not scratching up the rest of the job. You're containing it in that area. So I just use a very dull chisel just to start the tape, and we'll remove the tape off the repair. So that should be it. Okay, we've got it masked off here, and we're going to scuff this out for the gel coat. I've gone down to 220 grit paper, okay, and I've actually put it on a soft block here, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up scuffing this entire area. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I've got it really, I'm not going to gouge the edges there and make a lip, but I'm certainly going to sand it really well, both sides, all the way around. Okay, and that looks really good. Okay, and I'll get that dust up, and then use a paper towel to wipe that up, and then give it a little wipe with some acetone, just lightly. You don't need to go crazy, just to get rid of the residual dust on that surface. And that is now ready for gel coat. Okay, we're going
to... Okay, the video was a little stop-started, maybe a little difficult to watch there, but hopefully everybody got the gist of what we were trying to do there. So I don't know if there's any questions about that. Hopefully people understood what I was saying there.
Yeah, so Mark, one comment, so last week we filled it, we ground it out, we filled it, we did the vinyl ester as sort of the original filler. And then after you sanded that, you did the Formula 27 as a second coat. You want to comment on that real quick?
Yeah, the vinyl ester is a very strong putty. It doesn't sand as easily as most of the putties. So if there's a good chip in there, I use that as, I guess you could call it more of a structural fill. And once I've sanded that with the 80 grit to get it to shape, then I'll give it a tight screed with the Formula 27, which is a lot finer putty, and that'll fill in all the little imperfections and pinholes. And then once again, I'll go at that with 80 grit again. And what I was saying there was I used the tape on the edge as a sanding guide. So, leave the tape there so you're not scuffing up the rest of the boat, and then when you're close, when you got your shape of it, then pull the tape and you can just sand that little edge that the tape will leave behind away.
Okay, just had a quick question here. Remind everybody the specific putty you used last week, the vinyl ester putty.
Okay, that is a 3M vinyl ester fiberglass reinforced putty. So it's a 3M product. And then the finish filler, or if you got smaller little chips you want to fill, I use the, it's an Evercoat Formula 27 is what it's called. And that sands really nicely. And the reason, and you can use, there's a lot of putties on the market, and you can use pretty much anything. That's just my preference, and I've found that those two products actually sand out nicely, and they don't clog up my paper.
Excellent. All right, let's jump back to the video here. We're going to start and talk about gel coat and mixing and blending, and then we'll stop and chat about that again.
Okay.
We're going to go to the gel coats now. And like we had talked about earlier, if you can get a few whites, or if you can get gel coat from the Hobie Cat company that matches the hull, that'd be perfect. If you can't, you're going to have to match the color. And certainly with older boats, you're going to have to play with the gel coats a little bit. The first thing I'd like to show you is, okay, I'm fortunate, like I said, that I have a lot of choice of gel coat whites. And there's no such thing as a white. There's so many variations of white. And you can see I put little swatches on my cabinet here so that I can kind of start by seeing what tone of white I'm looking for. Okay, and right off the bat, I'm looking at the Hobie Cat, and I'm seeing the one down the bottom here is probably one of the closer matches, which is a Sea Hunter gel coat, and Wellcraft looks pretty close too. So, and I'll show you in a minute what I'll do with those two gel coats on the hull to try and determine whether that's the correct color. I use Spectrum. They're a good company. Hopefully they don't mind me using their name. And for the gel coats and the additives for the gel coat, I talked about Patch Aid, which I found to work very well. It helps hide the halo effect. You know, we had scuff that repair out, and once you spray the Patch Aid on, it helps reduce and blend in that edge. Okay. Styrene is the other product that is used to thin resins and gel coats. The one disadvantage I have found in experience with the styrene is it can tend to yellow a little bit. Okay, so I actually don't use the styrene too much anymore. I did have this little container of wax solution. As I said, gel coat, the outer layer never cures when exposed to oxygen. So it always stays tacky. The idea is in the mold, the surface will stay tacky so that you can lay your laminate, your resins, and your fiberglass cloth on top of that sticky layer. So if you do put a wax solution into the gel coat, it'll help for that surface to cure properly. Patch Aid does the same thing. The disadvantage with the wax solution is it tends to gum up the paper. So if you don't intend sanding the gel coat, then use the wax solution. So I generally don't do it on these kind of repairs. I thought I'd just mention it. I guess I'm rambling a little bit there. Okay, so we're getting back to the gel coats. We talked about the pigments too. So these are probably the most common ones. Yellow iron oxide is probably the one pigment that I would use to get that if a boat is faded really badly. And what I do is I'll sharpen a little mixing stick, and the minutest of amounts. Like I was saying, with pigments, the colors are so strong that the smallest little amount will change your color fairly dramatically. So be very conservative with your gel coats, with your pigments. It's really tough to blend with pigments. Okay, and should we go right into spraying utensils then? So there's a number of things you can.
All right, why don't we stop there real quick and talk about mixing. Come on.
Are you able to understand what's going on in the video there? Sometimes it's a little difficult to, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, so let's chat about the mixing a little bit. So, you know, there's many different shades of white. Just like if you go to the paint store, you're buying paint for your house, right? There's 100 different whites, and trying to find the white for your, you know, your perfect match of the boat is not as simple as it might sound. There's no generic white. So, so Mark, have you found any particular brand that makes a white that is close to Hobie Cat's white?
Okay, that's a good question, because they vary. You know, the year to year, the white seems to vary just a little bit. And a few years ago, I actually did get a container from Hobie Cat on the West Coast, and it was a fairly close match. It wasn't 100%, but it was close. So I think what I was going for there, actually the Wellcraft was the one that we ended up using. Wellcraft was a match. I want to say that was an '01 batch of Wellcraft that we had. But a lot of times, if you go to the company, they will sometimes help you, to the gel coat manufacturers. You know, they will sometimes, Spectrum are very helpful, you know, and sometimes they'll guide you in the right direction. But that's the one that we ended up actually using. It was slightly I mean, to the trained eye, it was very slightly yellow, but that was probably one of the closer matches. Yeah.
So I have this one here I just pulled up. So it's called from Total Boat, and it's not a perfect match, but it needs a little work with the dyes, but it seems like it's a good start that I've actually used myself. I don't know if you've used that brand at all.
Which one is it? I can't see it on the screen. That's Evercoat you're looking at?
It's called Total Boat is the brand.
Total Boat, okay. I'm not familiar with it, but there's a lot of gel coats out there, and you know, like I was saying there, like there's all variations of white. So if you can get something close, and you know, maybe get a couple of variations, you can. The best way is to actually mix the gel coats. If you can get different shades of gel coat and kind of blend them to get the color that you want, that's usually the best way to go. Once you start, like I was saying in that video, once you start messing with pigments, the pigments are very, very strong. So it becomes really difficult to get the right color. You got to add the smallest amount to make, it makes a pretty big difference to the color of the gel coat. Yeah.
Okay, so before we go back to the video, so one sort of other question. So there are companies out there that will make a custom gel coat, and they have all these little swatches that you can get and try to match the color. You know, I think there's minimums you have to order, but have you ever tried any of those and have those work for you?
Yes, I have. I see Wally actually sent a message in there. Wally's a very proficient fiberglass worker too, and he actually gave a code there to get a match. And yeah, you can go to some of the fiberglass companies, and they, if you have a test piece, they will match to that. Personally, I haven't had very good luck with that. I've sent a number of little swatches out, and I haven't had very, very good luck with that. So I've ended up getting a collection of gel coats, and with all the boats in the marina, I'll actually end up matching my own colors. And it takes a little bit of practice, granted, you know, but yeah, that's about all I can say on that.
All right, excellent. All right, let's go back to the video then, and you can show us how to do the spraying.
You can use to spray gel coats, okay? The easiest way is if you can still find the, I guess the crown spray craft or air canisters like this with the attachments. They used to come with these attachments on the top. That's probably the easiest. And what we used to do was we would put this in a cooler with hot water. We put a couple of canisters in there so that we, as soon as we started losing pressure, we could grab another canister so to keep spraying. So Prevail is the more readily available little air canister. It doesn't quite hold as much air in it as the spray tool does, but it can work for small repairs. The canister cools pretty quick, so if you can kind of keep it warm as you're spraying, it helps with the pressure. Okay, this is actually PVA in here, which is polyvinyl acetate. So I'll use the canister once I've sprayed my gel coat and it starts tacking up. I'll put the PVA on top of it to help cure the gel coat. And they say even with the patch aid, you don't need to put the PVA on top of it. I tend to do that anyway, just so, because the PVA is a nice sanding guide as well. Helps you sand down your gel coat and you can see all the little nubs in it. Okay, so those are your little air canisters. So the ideal way is to get some pressured air. Okay, and we've rigged a couple of tools here. With the spray tools, we've actually glued it onto an air chuck. It looks really rough, but it actually works fairly effectively, you know, for smaller little repairs. Okay, put a gauge on this one so I can monitor the pressure coming through there a little bit. A really good tool to use though is the 3M spray tool. You can get different tips for it, which makes it nice for cleaning. So if you do run a little long and your gel coat starts kicking on you, at least you're not too worried. You can remove the tip on the end here and replace it or clean it or throw it away. So this is actually a really nice tool. And what's nice about this is, you know, when you're spraying, you can actually just, without using a canister or anything on top, you can just pour the gel coat in there. If you're doing a vertical shoot, you can just pour the gel coat in there, shoot it, pour a little bit more. It actually makes it a lot easier rather than wasting a cup on the top, you know? Okay, so these are gel coat guns. They're fairly cheap guns. This is a 2.5 tip and a 2.0 tip. Okay, the bigger the tip is, all you're trying to do with the gel coat is get the product onto the surface. Okay, you're not necessarily looking for the best finish. Obviously, if you get a nice finish on it, it makes the sand out a lot easier. But basically, you just wanted to get as much material as you can onto that surface. So 2.5 puts a lot of material on there. You got to watch out for sagging. Obviously, you want to get it right to that point, but that'll move a lot of product onto the surface. So that actually works really well. Okay, and that should be that. To match your gel coats, we had looked at our charts on the cabinet there, and I've got a bunch of gel coats here. I've actually got Sea Ray Arctic White, and the idea is that you buff out or find the cleanest place, a clean place on your hull, acetone it, and maybe just go over it with a little bit of compound just to clean the surface, so that you know you're getting a clean match and you're taking any of the staining and stuff off, because you want to match the gel coat down below, the deeper gel coat. You don't want any surface contamination on it. You don't want to match that color, because once you start wet sanding it, you're going to go down into the gel coat a little bit. So you want to go to the deeper gel coat colors. So the best method is to actually go with a little 1200, wet sand it out, and then compound it, and use that little spot to match the gel coat. Okay, we got some Sea Ray Arctic White here, and hopefully you can see the color match. We're losing a little bit of our sunlight here, but if you get up close here, you can see that this is a little yellow. So I don't particularly like that match right there, and a good way is to shade it to see the color a little more clearly. Okay, and this one is Cobia White. I'm going to put that on there, and I usually take my thumb and I kind of smear it out so it kind of blends it in, and then you can see the contrast between the color of the boat and the gel coat you're trying to match. That one is also a little too yellow, a little too creamy. Okay, so we're going to go to Wellcraft White here, and these are colors you can get from Spectrum. Okay, I'm going to put a nice blob on there. Okay, and smear it out. I'm really liking that color. That's starting to look pretty good. Okay, I got a couple more here we can try. Okay, we got a Viking White. Okay, these are all boat manufacturers. Okay, I'm gonna put that one on. Okay, now we're going too far. That one is too white. Okay, you can see the color on there. Okay, and I smear it out so that you get a nice thin layer on there, and that's the best way to read the color of the gel coat. Okay, and here we've got a Sea Hunter. Okay, and this one is also too white. Okay, you see that one, a little too white. So I'm liking this one, and if I'm finding that this one is maybe a little too creamy, I would actually take a little bit of the white one and just blend it in there until I get to a color that I really like. Okay? Okay, I've put a little bit of gel coat into a mixing cup. I've got about an ounce in here, ounce and a half. The mixing ratio for patch.
Should we stop it right there, Rich? I see we got a couple of questions.
Gel coat to 30.
Sure. So we've got a couple of questions come in, so let's jump to those.
I know I'm probably rambling a little bit there. My daughter's probably wagging her finger at me for going on. And I know it's difficult to see the colors on that boat there. It was really difficult to tell. So hopefully people are kind of following along with that, you know?
Yeah, so all right, so a couple of questions that came in. So two common ones here. Will the color change as it dries, or will it stay the same?
Yes, from that wet color, once you catalyze it, you don't want to over catalyze anything when you go to let it dry. So usually the guideline is about 12 drops per ounce. Okay, and obviously as it gets hotter, the material is going to dry quicker, so you can take it down to like 10 or 9 drops per ounce. You know, that's a fairly strong catalyst rate, you know, so it's going to go off in probably 15 to 20 minutes. It's going to start hardening. You know, if you're in 85 degrees, well, then you're looking at probably 10 minutes. It's going to, with 12 drops in there, it's going to start kicking off. So yes, once you take that gel coat out and like I was showing you, smear it on the hull, that should be a pretty accurate color, you know. You're going to put the patch shade which in there. If you do use that additive, you don't have to. You can shoot the gel coat just the way it is. Sometimes it tends to be a little thick, but you can do that if you're able. You've got a big enough tip, you're able to transfer that material to the boat. And yeah, the color swatch that you do on the boat should be pretty close to what it dries like. Yes, like I said earlier, the styrene over time can yellow the finish a little bit.
So you mentioned temperature a couple of times. So, so let's take it the other way. So how cold is too cold for gel coat and resin?
Okay, you certainly don't want to go to freezing. Okay, nothing's going to go. So 40 degrees is probably as low as you can go. You know, what I usually do in that case is I'll get a little heat lamp, you know, just like a fish tank heat lamp or just a heat light. And I'll put that on the boat. You don't want to overheat it. I usually put my hand in front of it and you just feel it warm. So you can do it that way too. If you just put that heat lamp on it in cold conditions, I would certainly not attempt to dry anything probably under 45 degrees. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so one more question here. So this was really about mixing ratios. So this person had purchased some gel coat and there was not a whole lot of guidance on the mixing ratios for the hardener on the label. So any advice on that? Okay,
there's not really a mixing ratio with gel coat. I mean, gel coat is what it is, you know, and you know, unless you're putting an additive to it like the patch shade, and I think that depending on you get speed and fast and slow patch shade, you know, different rates of curing times, and then there'll be a different ratio that you mix in. Fast patch shade is a 70% gel coat to a 30% patch shade. So I don't know if that was the question, but I'm assuming what you're talking about is the catalyst rate. Put in the catalyst to dry the gel coat. And like I said earlier, my rule of thumb is 12 drops per ounce. So if you've got a little dropper container or a little dropper, 12 drops per ounce is usually my guide. And then once I put that in, mix it and don't dilly-dally, go for it.
All right, good. Now, do you change the rate, the amount of catalyst ever? Like, for example, if you thin the gel coat with styrene, for example, or something, do you change that ratio at all?
No, it'll be the same ratio to catalyze it. Yep.
All right.
We catalyze it at the same rate. And just a word of warning, if that gel coat starts curing on you, bag it. As soon as it starts gelling, don't try and put it on because it's going to harden in your gun. Bag the operation and mix a new batch, and you'll usually have enough time to put another layer on there again. But as soon as that material starts hardening, you're pretty much done, you know?
Okay, so then we had a couple questions come in by email, and maybe this is a good time to cover them about, so we're about to show in the video spraying, but what about other techniques? So for example, brushing versus rolling versus spraying.
Okay, yeah, we had talked about that, Richie, and I think both Richie and I agree, and in our experience and trial and error, the rolling and the brushing, or even a roll and tip, it's really difficult to be successful at. The challenge is that you put too many grooves into your finish on the gel coat, and when you go and try and wet sand it out, to get rid of all those imperfections in there, you end up burning through 90% of the time. Even if you roll it, you're not able to get enough material on. It seems the most successful way is with an air gun of some sort, and you're able to just kind of blob that material on, for lack of a technical term. So yeah, I mean, you're welcome to try, and like we had talked in the first episode, I even tried brushing it on and really laying it on and then putting some wax paper or on it to try get a smoother finish. But even that, you get air bubbles and imperfections in it. And I mean, really the most successful way, and you can just brush it and walk away from it. There's that option. But if you're looking for a good finish, the air gun is really the way to go.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that in my experience too. Yeah, the only exception I think with the roller would be something like, you know, you were working on a, you know, like a keel boat, and you wanted to, you know, recreate non-skid in the cockpit or something like that.
Yeah,
that would be a completely different
right.
situation. So, all right, so let's jump back and let's look at some spray, just how to spray the gel coat.
Patch 8. So I'm going to add probably about half an ounce of patch 8 to the gel coat. Okay, and then mix it up really well. Okay, I don't want too much patch 8 in there, otherwise it's going to make it a little too thin, and we're not going to get the volume that we want on it. Okay, and then the standard catalyzing rate, rule of thumb, is about 12 drops to an ounce. Obviously, the warmer the conditions, you may want to pull that back a little bit, otherwise the gel coat's going to start curing on you very quickly. So I'm going to put in 12 drops into this, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I actually put in a couple more there just so it can kick. Okay, mix that catalyst up. Okay, and then we'll go to spray it on the boat. I've got my AccuSpray Spray 3M gun here that I'm going to use for this application. I've got my fan dialed way down, so it's brought the fan down a little bit, and I've got fairly low pressure. So HVLP is the best way to go, high volume, low pressure. You just want to move the material onto the job. So I'm going to try that little method. I'm just going to pour it into the top of this little tip here. And slowly I'm going to do a little test spot. Okay, it looks like the gel coat's going on there nicely. So I'm going to start where my repair is, and I'm just going to start covering it. Okay, and I'm going to do the other side. I'm not putting too much material on because it's actually really thin and it's starting to sag. So I'll give it a moment to air dry, and then I'll try to put another coat on. So I want to put as much material as I can on there without it sagging and dripping off there. So I'll wait for a second and I'll put another coat on, and I'll keep doing that. And when I do my application, I'm doing like little shots like that. So I'm trying to build the gel coat up, and then I'll just let it tack up just a little, air dry just a little bit, and I'll try to put some more to the point that it starts running. Once it starts running, then I'll stop. Okay, so before this, the gel coat actually starts to kick, I end up cleaning the tip out and get all that gel coat washed out. Okay. Okay, we've sprayed our gel coat, and as you can see, it's the overspray has likely gone onto the tape. So the majority of the spray is on the repair. Okay, very little of it is actually oversprayed, and we definitely haven't got an edge onto the tape there. Okay, so I did a test spot over here, and you can see the gel coat is starting to tack up now. Okay, it's not runny anymore. You can see it's starting to cure. So it's partially staying on the glove there. Okay, at this point, with the patch 8, it is not necessary to put PVA over the surface, but I do it anyway as a sanding guide. But if you don't use patch 8, you definitely want to use the PVA to cover the surface so that the outer layer of the gel coat cures properly. So I'm going to give this, as it starts tacking up, I'm going to give it a nice coat of polyvinyl acetate, PVA, which is a release agent, okay, but it's a water-based product, and it'll coat the repair really well. Okay, there you go. Okay, so we shot it, we put our PVA over the surface, and we're going to walk away from this and let it cure. It should be ready to sand in probably an hour to 2 hours. I usually like to do it overnight, let it cure up, and then come back in the morning and wet sand it out. Give it a good chance to cure up. Okay, if we get a chance, we'll try and make cover the wet sanding side.
Okay.
Okay, we got.
Should we stop it there, Rich?
Repair done with the gel coat and.
Okay, so
did everybody follow that? I mean, that's probably the most kind of intimidating part of it, you know, when you're actually spraying that gel coat on. And you can actually see how it went on there so easy. Actually, the first spray, as soon as it went on, I was like, man, whoa, there, the repair's gone, you know. But so basically what I did there was, and that little AccuSpray, that 3M AccuSpray tool actually works really well. I'm starting to use it more and more, and it's really easy, you know, in that you can take that tip out and you can clean them or just throw it away, you know, as opposed to a regular gun. And that was the other thing we had talked about. The gravity-fed gun seems to be the most effective way. So the material is dropping into the tip, into the air pressure, and being applied to the boat, as opposed to a pickup tube, okay, which tries to pick the gel coat up from the bottom. I haven't had as much success with that. And as soon as it starts getting a little thicker, then it clogs up that gun straight away. So it's not as effective on the pickup. So the gravity fed seems to be work the best, you know. Yeah, and I think that covers a little bit.
okay, so we had a question about the air barrier. So just, I guess, maybe to expand on that. So gel coat essentially will not cure exposed to oxygen. So you need something to create a barrier between the oxygen and the gel coat to get it to cure. So Bill asks about using something like a saran wrap product or something to cover it up. And I think you alluded to that earlier. Maybe comment on that, and also wax versus PVA again.
Yeah. Okay. So gel coat is intended for construction of boats in a mold. So basically, it's the first product to go into a polished and waxed mold. So that's basically your outer finish, obviously, like you've seen on the boats there. And then the fiberglass laminates go on top of that. So the intention with the gel coat is that that surface stays sticky, enabling your laminate, your fiberglass laminate, to lay into that sticky layer and basically bond to that gel coat. So we're doing a reverse repair here. So by spraying on the gel coat onto the surface, that outer layer is always going to stay tacky. So we had talked about putting a wax additive into the gel coat material during the spray. The disadvantage with that is that it it tends to gum up your paper when you go to wet sand it out. If you're just walking away from the job, you can put a wax additive in and you can brush it or spray it or roll it, and that wax additive will come to the surface of the gel coat and help it cure all the way through. Patch shade is intended to do that same thing. I have had a couple of jobs, I don't know if it's humidity related or whatever, where the surface has stayed a little sticky and it's tough to sand. So I'm in a habit now where even with the patch shade, which I'm actually using more as a reducer and a way to eliminate the halo effect on the edge of your repair, on each repair, I'm still putting PVA over the surface. And PVA is a water-based product. It's really easy. It's not toxic, you know, to the smell, or, you know, and it's easy to use. And to me, that's the most effective. You're not messing with the wet gel coat on the surface. So you're basically just putting a layer on there with the spray gun and walking away. The problem with putting saran wrap or a wax paper or any kind of material to help seal it, yes, that will, if you've got a really thick layer on there and you want that dry, absolutely, that'll help dry and avoid it getting sticky. But now you've got this texture of your wax paper in that finish. So if you sprayed it on, you only got, I guess, a 1/16 of an inch material on there. And if you put wax paper in there, you're gonna really mess with that surface. So when you go to wet sand it out, you're inevitably gonna burn through to your repair. So that's the disadvantage about putting a saran wrap or a wax paper or a peel ply on there. You know, is that you're gonna mess with the finish. Even though you got orange peel, you can actually sand that out relatively easily. Hopefully that answers that question.
All right, excellent. All right, why don't we continue?
Okay.
The PVA over the surface, I've allowed it to dry overnight. I'm going to do a quick sand out. So I'm going to take some 320 on a soft block, or you can do a hard block initially. And I'm going to concentrate on sanding the edges first. Okay, you can see how the overspray is on the edge of the tape, so it's not a very thick coat. So I'm going to use the 320 to sand it out. And I'm concentrating on sanding through to the tape. And then I'm basically going to use the PVA to get rid of all the imperfections in the finish there. So the PVA acts as a bit of a guide coat. Okay, so I'm going to not go too deep, but I'm going to use the 320 to sand out the rest of it. Okay, sanded it out. I've lost my videographers, so I'm basically doing a selfie thing here. So I've 320'd it out, okay, taking all the imperfections out of it. I sand the flat first before I go do the round, okay? So once I've got this point now, I'll pull my tape and I'll sand the edges off. I know it's in the sun, but I sanded it out with 320, just to the point that I'm seeing the imperfections disappear and maybe even leaving a couple. Now I'm gonna jump right down to 800 wet. Okay, I've gone 800, 1,000, 1,200 wet. Using, with the 800, using a paper towel to remove the sanding residues so I can look for any imperfections or an edge around the edge of the repair. So I've basically gone 800, 1,000, 1,200, and now I'm going to use a heavy-duty, 3M heavy-duty gel coat compound to take the 1,200 scratches out.
Okay.
All right, that's the end of our video here. Let me get back to this.
So that was the sand out process there, and that's, so 320 was taking out the orange peel from the spray job. I'm leaving the tape there while I'm sanding it out until I get almost sanded out perfectly. There may be a couple of little imperfections. I'm favoring the tape side, okay? A tip for doing this kind of repair is to do the flat surfaces first. It's key to do that. Once you get the sides, the flat surfaces done, then you go at the curved piece. If you go at the curved piece first, you're going to end up sanding too much away and get a divot in the repair. So the key is to focus on the flat surfaces, the side surfaces, and I actually favor towards the tape a little bit, so that I sand the tape out, I take all the overspray, and then I'll just work across that surface to get my finish, you know, and take out the imperfections. And then I jump straight from the 320 to 800. 800, I'll take the edge of where the tape was and take out the rest of the imperfections. And then the 1000 and 1200 are just kind of habit, if you will, to make sure that when you do go and compound it out, you get a beautiful shine. Okay, and a word of tip with the compounding, it's more technique than anything else. Okay, if you got a good compound, and that 3M heavy gel coat compound works well for me, is a cross pattern. So you go straight up, and then you go 90 degrees. You can go diagonally too, but the key is to work the whole surface evenly. Okay, you don't need to require a lot of pressure, and let the compound work for you. Let the compound do the job for you. You don't need a lot of pressure. So I'll usually start off really slow speed with my buffer, and I'll work that pattern back and forth. And then as the compound starts disappearing and working away, I will increase the speed and go very lightly and just go with that pattern again, crossways, crosshatch pattern, until I get a perfect buff. Okay, and you can throw a little bit of wax after you've done it. You can throw a little bit of wax on there so doesn't get dirty, and to protect it. How's that?
All right, excellent. So when you get to the higher grits, so that like the 1000 and the 1200, I mean, usually the repair is looking pretty good at that point. So how much sanding are you really doing with those really high grit papers?
Not very much. Most of my focus, my 320, I'm knocking down the bulk of it, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then my 800 is where I'm getting it virtually perfect. Okay, I'm taking out any other little nicks or the edge where the tape. I'm basically getting it perfect with the 800. Okay, I'm also keeping in mind that I don't have a lot of material on there, so I don't want to sand too much material away. And then the 1000 and 1200 is just to kind of shine it up, get rid of those 800 scratches, so that when I hit with the compound, I've got to shine quick. Yep.
Okay, that seems to be the real trick, right? Is that final high gloss sort of shine. So you look at it in the light, you don't see the repair. Everything blends in with the original gel coat.
Yeah, and like you're saying, Richie, that's the key too. So 320 with the tape there as a guide. You don't want to put those 320 scratches into the clean surface, if you will. Pull that tape. You can use the 320 very carefully on that edge to get rid of whatever's left behind from the tape being there, whatever gel coat's there, very carefully. And then the 800, you can go for it. You can like go 2 to 3 inches into the boat now, into the existing surface, so that you can now get your surface all the way down. So 800 you can go for it, because you know you're going to be able to remove those scratches really easily. And that's actually a good tip if you do like scuff up against something and you have little scratches in the side of your boat. Go to 800. 800, just wet sand those little scratches out, and then go 1000, 1200 as a habit and compound it out.
Right. Excellent. All right. So yeah, that's a good coverage, I think, of the process of the ding repair, and I think it shows kind of illustrates to really do it and make it perfect what's involved. A lot of folks, like we mentioned in episode 1, would say, oh, just slap some marine text on there and call it done, but you're never going to get that perfect look. Sure, you might repair the little divot and fill it in, but it's not, you're always going to see it. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Richie, I mean, you can use the marine text, but you're always going to see that little imperfection there. So if you're wanting to go one step further and make that repair disappear. As you can see there, I mean, you couldn't see it on the bow. So, I mean, that's ideal, but it's definitely going to take a couple more steps, you know, and it's really not that difficult if you just follow the steps along there. Yeah. And, you know, hopefully we'll be available if there are any other questions, and if anybody needs some help or whatever, you know, we're always available too.
Yeah, so a few people have sent questions in by email to me, and we've tried to respond to them. A few of those questions made it into the live session here, and some we just answered by email. So feel free to do that if you have some problems with your repair. We'll be happy to try and help. I guess one thought that comes to mind, Mark, I mean, what would you do different? I mean, you have a pretty new boat there. So what would you do different? Let's say it was a really older boat. It was really faded, or maybe it was like a colored boat that was, and again, it was faded. So how would you approach kind of blending then the repair in with a heavily faded boat or a colored boat?
Yeah, and that's the biggest challenge is with the older boats. Yeah, that was fortunate. That is a new boat. It's a little easier, but certainly like a yellow boat, it's a really, really tough color to match. So that's something that you probably want to take a test sample to a gel coat supplier and try and get that color matched. If the color is not close, then yeah, then you may have to either lighten it up with some white gel coat, or you may have to get a little bit of the mustard, the yellow oxide pigment, to darken it a little bit if the boat's really badly faded. But the whole key behind an older boat and a colored boat is to take that outer surface away so that you actually get down to the fresh gel coat. And that's the color that you want to match. If you don't do anything to that surface and try to match that color, as soon as you sand it out, you're going to be sanding through the outer surface of that older finish, and you're going to be exposing fresher gel coat, which is going to be a different color. So what I would suggest with an older boat, if you're just looking at the area of the repair, you want to probably sand that out with, you know, 320, 800, go through that process, 320, then go 800, 1000, 1200, and compound it and see what color you have. I mean, you may want to go as far as doing the 800, 1000, 1200 over your entire hull, because you would be amazed how beautiful that would look, bringing out the old color. Or even just a very good compound will bring your color back to your boat.
Okay. And then when you're compounding, are you using what kind of bonnet are you using?
Sorry, Richie, and what kind of
bonnet are you using on your buffing machine?
Okay, yeah, and I touched on that earlier. So 3M make a white bonnet, which is a little more of an aggressive cloth. It's a wool cloth, or wool fiber rather, and that is intended more for the compounding. And then there's a gold bonnet, which is a lot finer material for your finish polish and potentially your wax. So the white bonnet is basically so I'm staying with the 3M. 3M have some really good products.
Okay, excellent. All right. What else can you think of here?
Well, you know, we had a couple of other pictures there on structural stuff. So, you know, we did a basic fiberglass repair. So we've gone through the finish job. But if you get like a major impact and you have like a crack in the hull and you're having to grind that out and you're going down to the core, a lot of the times just fixing the outer skin of the hull is not sufficient for the repair. So a lot of times you're going to have to access it from the backside. And it's something that I've found that works really well. And you're like, oh man, I don't want to cut another hole into my boat to repair this. But the truth is there's a very thin core material in there with a thin layer of laminate to either side. So in order to repair that correctly without it breaking down again, you need to fix the inner core again. So we have a Hobie 18 here that had a major impact. And what I've found, as you'll see as the pictures go on, we call it a little pumpkin shell. So on the inside of this hull, we ended up cutting a square, as you can see there. The key to that, and it makes it really easy for the repair, is to cut it at that angle. Cut it at an angle all the way around. So I'm using an oscillating tool for that, really fine tool. You can use a jigsaw. A jigsaw tends to take a little bit more material out. So you may have to put a little bit of fiberglass cloth in between it when you put the lid back in again. But, you know, cutting that hole out and then having to put that lid back in makes that access point a lot easier to deal with. Because, you know, as opposed to cutting a round circle, now you got to put a piece of string through that and try and get some cloth on the backside. It makes a little bit of a challenge. So that's it. That's a really good tip, is we call it a pumpkin lid. So cut it at an angle like that so that you can basically just put that square right back in there again. And in that way, you got access to the inside of your repair. Okay, so I mean, I've gone ahead now and I've ground it all out right down to the core. The filler that you see there is it's a lightweight polyester filler that I'm using as a replacement for the core. So I've taken out all the damaged core material there, and I'm basically putting this filler in there, and then I'm going to grind that filler fair and then gloss over that again. So, and then on the inside, I would have scuffed that. It gets really tight in there, but I've basically got my hand in there, and with either 80 and I'll go as much as 36 grit, I'll end up scuffing the whole inside after I've acetoned it really well. You got to make sure it's clean. And I'll put a couple of layers of glass on the inside to get my strength back there.
So, Mark,
getting excited, yeah. Getting an itch in my throat.
All right, while you're getting a drink there, so when you're doing that kind of interior you know, structural work, what particular type of fiberglass, you know, this is not going to be something that's going to be seen, it's on the inside of the boat, but what kind of fiberglass are you using there?
Okay, same like we had mentioned in the first episode, Richie, I would stay with my polyester products. The hulls are constructed with a polyester-based resin, so I'm going to stay with the polyester. I mean, you could step it up to a vinyl ester, which is a more of a waterproof resin. It's a lot stronger. It's kind of in between a polyester and an epoxy. Epoxies probably have the best bonding and are some of the strongest materials. I don't think it's necessary to go with an epoxy laminate on a job like this. I think you'll get enough strength with the polyester resins and fiberglass. You are welcome to do that. The disadvantage is that it's an overnight cure with the epoxy. So it becomes a lot longer working time. You're going to have to put one laminate on and then walk away. Now, granted, with epoxies, they do tend to be a little cleaner in that when you put your material, and with epoxies, they need to be epicized, which means that the cloth that you use, they call it epicized, it's not glued together. The material is not glued together with an adhesive that the polyester resins would break down when you use. So you got to make sure that the cloth that you use is epicized. And the nice thing about the epoxies is that you can put a peel ply layer over that. Like you can put your resin and your cloth down and then put a peel ply layer and then take a squeegee or a scraper and move all the excess resin out, and then you unfortunately have to leave it overnight. But when you come to in the morning and pull that peel ply away, your finish is pretty good. So, but for a job like this, I would just stay with the polyester so that I could do multiple laminates in a session of working.
Okay, so the polyester resin, the other thought I had was what particular cloth are you using? Anything different on the inside than what you're using on the outside?
Yeah, not really. That's a trade. If it's really beaten up and stuff, I would go with a layer of the matte first. That seems to bond the best. So if I'm using a woven cloth, and you can use different weights and different grades of woven cloth, that's really your choice. If you're wanting to build it up, you can use a heavier cloth. But what I always tend to do is I'll put a layer of matte down. I find that if you just use a layer of woven cloth on the surface, sometimes you're able to, if it's got a little edge or something, you're able to grab that edge and you can actually peel that woven cloth off. So I'm in the habit of putting a layer or a very thin layer, maybe a 4-ounce layer of matte on there first, and then putting my woven cloth on top of that. So on the inside of this job, I would have probably done that, probably put a layer of matte and then a layer of woven on top of that, so that I got some good structural strength on the inside.
Okay, we got a few more photos here. Why don't we step through those?
The one disadvantage, just while I'm thinking about it, is that with the woven cloth, if you start grinding into that, sometimes it doesn't leave a really good finish. It tends to have some air and stuff in it. So I'll put a layer of matte down to get a good bond to the initial surface, a layer of woven fabric on there, and then I'll put a layer of matte on top of that so that I can use that as my grinding surface. So I can sand into the matte and I won't mess with the woven cloth as much. So it'll be bedded into the repair. So that's a thought. So at this point, you can see I probably made a pretty hot mix on the bow there. That's why it's pretty brown. But so we've replaced the core on the inside, and I've started laminating to try and get the structure back in the bow. In the right photograph, that's looking on the inside. It's a little tough to tell, but we've put a layer of matte and a layer of woven cloth on the inside there. Okay, it looks really ugly. Actually, this looks like it's before I've put the core material. You can see how there was bad core material. The green is what is the core material, and I've taken that core material out. I've put the laminate on the inside so that I have some structure to work against, and then I'm going to replace that green core material there with a polyester lightweight filler. There's not much structural strength in it, but with the glass on top of that filler, it'll create a good structural integrity on that bow area. Okay, so yeah, you can see the core material, the core filler, let's call it that. The core filler is inside the repair, and I've put looks like chop strand on the outside there. Number of layers of, yeah. So this is getting to the fairing stage. So now I've probably ground that fiberglass out with 36, my little grinding disc, to a fairly fair finish. And now I'm starting, that looks like Formula 27 that I've used to get my final finish. So it's basically a finish filler. You can see the squares back in there, that pie plate was put back in there and just fed out in the right photograph there. So it actually looks pretty good, it actually ended up. So with the Formula 27, you're probably going to do like 6 coats of that. So you would coat it once and then you would block it out, give it another coat, block it out again. And you can use a DA tool or a vibrating sander to do that as well. That'll work pretty well to speed your process up. Okay, and then we masked it off and we ended up spraying the gel coat. The left photograph, you can see the PVA is being applied there, and you can see I've got a couple of sags in the gel coat. So I laid it on as thick as I could, and then in the right photograph, we started sanding it out.
All right, that's the end of that.
Okay, yeah, went with the 320 and then jumped straight down to the 800 and polished it out.
All right, excellent. I think we covered a lot of ground with that. Let's see, we've gone a little bit over an hour tonight. Does anyone have any other questions here on what we've shown tonight?
I see we lost a couple of our participants there.
Yeah,
I guess I was rambling on again.
All right, well, why don't we wrap up then? And like you said, if you have other questions, feel free to contact us by email. All right, well, thanks for joining in. I hope you found this informative. Like I said, this was brought to you by the International Hobie Class Association, and our hopes and desires are to do more of these and do a variety of different topics. So, you know, we thought we'd start with some boat repair topics, but our goals are to go cover a variety of topics and you know, recruit lots of different folks, hopefully, and get them to participate. So thanks for joining in. And
yeah, thank you very much. That was awesome.
all right. And Grace says, good job, Dad.
Okay, awesome.
Very good, Mark. Thanks for joining in tonight. Thanks for all the participants. And we'll,
yeah, thanks for asking me, and thanks for having me, Rich. I very much appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.